The sun was hitting the driveway at that perfect 45-degree angle, the kind of light that makes every microscopic speck of dust look like a floating diamond. I was hunched over, a microfiber cloth in my right hand and a bottle of high-end ceramic detailer in my left. This was my Tuesday ritual. To some, it was just a car, a machine of glass, rubber, and steel. But to me, the 2024 Mustang GT in midnight blue was a physical manifestation of 3 years of overtime, skipped vacations, and a diet consisting mostly of instant noodles. I moved the cloth in slow, rhythmic circles. The paint wasn't just blue, it was a deep, oceanic abyss that seemed to swallow the light. I could see my own reflection in the hood, a man in his late 20s, looking tired but proud. I loved the way the cold air of the late morning contrasted with the heat radiating off the engine block. I had just finished polishing the silver pony emblem on the grille when the sound of a sputtering, dying muffler broke the silence of the suburbs. I didn't even have to look up to know who it was. The sound of a 2005 sedan gasping for its final breath was the sonic signature of Marcus Thorne. Marcus was the kind of friend who didn't just enter a room, he collided with it. We had grown up on the same block, played on the same failing high school football team, and shared a bond forged in the fires of mutual boredom. But while I had moved toward stability, Marcus had remained a professional resident of the almost successful category. He was always one deal away from a fortune, 1 week away from a promotion, or, as was usually the case, 1 day away from a total disaster. He pulled up to the curb in a cloud of gray exhaust smoke. The door of his battered car groaned as he pushed it open. He looked like Marcus. His tie was slightly crooked, his hair was combed back with a bit too much gel in an attempt to look professional, and his eyes had that frantic, wide-eyed shimmer of a man who was about to ask for something he knew he shouldn't. "Elias. My man. My brother from another mother," Marcus shouted, throwing his arms out wide as he stepped onto my pristine driveway. I stopped polishing and stood up, my back popping. "You're late for something, Marcus. I can see it in your eyebrows. You only get that twitchy look when you're behind schedule." Marcus let out a forced, high-pitched laugh that died quickly in the morning air. He walked around the Mustang, looking at it with a mix of genuine admiration and predatory envy. "God, she's beautiful, Eli. You've really kept her in mint condition. That ceramic coat? It's like a mirror." "Get to the point, Marcus," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "I have a conference call in 20 minutes. His face dropped. The bravado vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated desperation. He leaned against the stone wall of my garage, avoiding eye contact. "The Corolla is dead, Eli. The transmission gave up the ghost 3 blocks from here. I had to coast it into a parking lot. I'm cooked. Totally cooked. I'm sorry to hear that, man. Truly. But I told you last month that the grinding sound wasn't character, it was a death rattle." I know. You were right. You're always right," he groaned, running a hand through his greasy hair. "But you don't understand the timing. Today is the day. The big one. I finally got an interview at Sterling and Associates. You know, the high-end architectural firm downtown? It's a junior consultant role. Benefits, a real salary, the whole 9 yards. If I show up in a rideshare or smelling like a bus, I'm done before I walk through the door. I need to look like a guy who's already winning." I felt the first pang of unease. I knew where this was going. The air felt suddenly heavier, the smell of the car wax cloying and sweet. "Marcus, no," I said firmly. "Eli, please. It's across town. The light rail is delayed, and the Ubers are surging like crazy. If I miss this, I lose the apartment. I'm not kidding. Sarah is ready to pack her bags. This job is the only thing keeping my head above water." He was good. He knew exactly which heartstrings to pull. He knew about my soft spot for his girlfriend, Sarah, who had spent the last 3 years patiently dealing with his entrepreneurial phases. Use a rental, I countered. With what credit card? They're all maxed out from the organic juice startup attempt, Marcus pleaded. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Look at me, Eli. I'm 30 years old. I'm wearing a suit I bought at a thrift store. I just need a win. Just one. I'll drive her like there's a crate of eggs in the back seat. I won't even go 5 miles over the limit. I'll park in the VIP structure safe, covered, monitored. I'll have her back by 4 p.m., with a full tank of premium. I swear on my mother's soul. I looked at the Mustang. The light played off the curves of the fenders. It was more than a car, it was my sanctuary. I had never let anyone else drive it. Not even my brother. Not even my father. It was the one thing in my life that was perfect, untarnished by the chaos of the outside world. But then I looked at Marcus. He looked small. He looked defeated. I remembered the time in 3rd grade when he had taken the blame for a window I'd broken with a baseball. He had sat in Saturday detention so I wouldn't lose my spot on the travel team. We had a history that was impossible to ignore, a ledger of favors and failures that stretched back 20 years. It's a manual transmission, Marcus, I said, my voice weakening. You haven't driven a stick shift in years. His eyes lit up with a spark of hope. It's like riding a bike, Eli. My first 3 cars were manuals. I love the feel of the gears. Please. You'd be saving my life. I'm not just asking for a car, I'm asking for a future. The silence stretched between us. In the distance, a dog barked. A lawnmower started up a few houses down. Everything felt normal, yet I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. My gut was screaming at me, a cold, sharp sensation in the pit of my stomach that told me to lock the garage and walk away. But my heart, or perhaps my guilt, whispered louder. If there is so much as a French fry crumb on the floorboard, Marcus, I will end you, I said, my voice low and dangerous. He practically leaped for joy. I swear. I'll wear gloves. I'll hold my breath so I don't fog up the windows. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key fob. It felt heavy, like a lead weight. I held it out, but I didn't let go immediately. When Marcus reached for it, I gripped it tighter. I mean it, I said, looking him dead in the eye. This isn't just a favor. This is my life. Do not exceed the speed limit. Do not take the scenic route. Go to the interview, park the car, do the interview, and come straight back. Do you understand? Loud and clear, Captain, Marcus said, his grin returning in full force. He gently pried the keys from my hand. I watched him walk toward the driver's side. He moved with a new sense of purpose, his shoulders squared. He touched the door handle with a reverence that almost made me feel better. Almost. He slid into the seat, and I heard the electric hum of the seat adjusting to his frame. He looked through the windshield at me and gave a thumbs up. Then, he pressed the starter button. The 5.0-liter V8 roared to life with a guttural, aggressive bark that echoed off the garage walls. It was a beautiful sound, usually, but today it sounded like a warning. Marcus revved the engine just a little and the car shook with latent power. Easy on the throttle. I yelled over the engine. I got it, I got it. He shouted back, his face illuminated by the digital dashboard. He engaged the clutch a bit jerkily, I noticed with a wince, and slotted the car into reverse. The Mustang backed out of the driveway, the tires crunching softly on the gravel. Marcus paused at the end of the drive, shifting into first. He gave me one last wave, a triumphant smirk on his face, and then he was gone. The sound of the engine faded as he moved down the street, replaced by the eerie, Hollow silence of an empty driveway. I stood there for a long time, the microfiber cloth still in my hand. The spot where the car had been looked vacant, like a missing tooth. I tried to tell myself I had done a good thing. I was a good friend. I was helping a man get back on his feet. But as I walked back into my house to start my workday, the check engine light of my own intuition was flashing red. I looked at the clock, 10:15 a.m. Just 6 hours, I whispered to the empty hallway. 6 hours, and she'll be home. I sat down at my desk, but I couldn't focus on the spreadsheets. Every time a car drove past my window, my head snapped up. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart skipped a beat. I had handed Marcus the keys to my car, but it felt like I had handed him the keys to my sanity. And somewhere, across the city, the midnight blue paint was catching the sun, moving further and further away from the safety of my garage and toward a destiny I couldn't yet imagine. The 6 hours I had allocated for Marcus's favor stretched out like an agonizing, silent movie. I tried to focus on my work, but spreadsheets and email threads felt distant, abstract concepts. My sanctuary, my home office, had become a waiting room for anxiety. I kept moving from my desk to the front window, peeling back the blinds every 10 minutes to stare at the empty spot in the driveway where the Mustang should have been. The neighborhood remained stubbornly peaceful, a UPS truck making deliveries, a lone jogger, a neighbor's dog barking at a passing squirrel. None of it provided the reassuring roar of a 5.0-liter V8. By 1 p.m., I started sending texts. "How's the interview?" I wrote, keeping it casual. "Checking in. Everything okay?" A half hour later, I tried again, "Give me a heads up when you're leaving downtown." Silence. By 2:30 p.m., the casual tone evaporated. I called him. It went straight to voicemail. That hollow, synthesized voice telling me to leave a message sent a spike of irritation, then worry, through my chest. Marcus was many things: chaotic, disorganized, financially irresponsible, but he usually kept his phone glued to his hand. Especially when he was desperate. "Marcus, you need to pick up," I said to the recording, my voice tighter than I intended. "I need my car back by 4, as agreed. Just text me back so I know you aren't dead in a ditch somewhere." The silence on the other end felt ominous. I sat back down at my desk, but I couldn't process the lines of code on my screen. I kept visualizing worst-case scenarios: he'd scraped the fender in the parking garage, he'd run out of gas because he was too broke to refill it, or, worse, he was sitting in the back of a police cruiser after trying to impress his prospective employers with a burnout. The thought of any damage to my midnight blue paint made my stomach churn. I checked my watch again, 3:15 p.m. He still had time, technically. Maybe the interview ran long. Maybe he was stuck in the inevitable afternoon gridlock on the I-95. I tried to rationalize his silence, but a darker intuition, the one that had screamed no this morning, was getting louder. The afternoon hummed along around me. The sunlight shifted across the floorboards. But inside my head, the volume was increasing. Every car that drove past made my heart stutter. I was on the verge of driving his sputtering, dying Corolla, which he had abandoned at the end of the street, just to trace his route, though I knew that was illogical. By 3:45 p.m., I went full manic mode. I began pacing the entire house, kitchen to living room, window to window. I checked his social media, hoping Sarah had posted something reassuring, but there was nothing. The empty driveway looked accusing now. Like a graveyard for my trust. I had handed Marcus the most valuable physical thing I owned, and he had vanished into the ether. The clock finally struck 4 p.m. The deadline came and went with no sound, no text, no rumble of exhaust. A profound sense of betrayal settled over me, replacing the anxiety. It was a cold, hollow feeling. I felt like a fool. I had ignored my gut, ignored my financial common sense, all because of some misplaced loyalty to a friend who hadn't really reciprocated that loyalty in a decade. I was angry at Marcus, but I was even angrier at myself. At 4:05 p.m., I sat down on my couch and turned on the television, desperate for distraction. I usually didn't watch the local news, but it was too early for prime time, so I settled on Channel 4. The 4 p.m. news block had just begun. I wasn't watching the broadcast, I was just letting the noise fill the silence of my suddenly very lonely house. I was staring at my phone, preparing to call Sarah, Marcus's girlfriend, and demand to know where he was. Then, my phone started vibrating so hard I thought it might leap out of my hand. A flurry of notifications popped up in quick succession. The first was a text from my younger brother, Leo, who worked across town. "Bro, tell me you haven't seen the news. Tell me that isn't your car." A second text from a high school friend I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. "Eli, are you driving the Mustang? If not, someone is giving her a workout on Channel 4 right now." My heart didn't drop, it completely ceased to beat for a terrifying moment. My gaze snapped to the TV screen. The standard local headlines about city council budget cuts and a warehouse fire were nowhere to be found. Instead, the screen was dominated by a frantic, dizzying aerial shot from a news helicopter, looking down upon the main interstate that circled the city. The shot was unstable, zoomed in, but instantly recognizable. The news anchor's voice, normally calm and professional, was laced with an adrenaline-fueled urgency. "We interrupt our regular programming for breaking news," she said. "We are bringing you a live feed of a high-speed pursuit on Interstate 95, just north of the downtown corridor. Police are pursuing a suspect who has allegedly led them on a chase that began 20 minutes ago near the industrial district." The camera zoomed in further, fighting the atmospheric blur and the setting sun. And there it was. The color was undeniable. The deep, rich, reflective midnight blue I had spent the entire morning polishing. The sleek lines, the aggressive silhouette of the 2024 Mustang GT. I knew that specific shade of blue better than I knew my own face. It wasn't just a Mustang. It was my Mustang. I stared at the screen, unable to move, unable to think. A profound, nauseating shock took hold of my body. It felt like my eyes were lying to me. This was a movie, a hallucination, anything but reality. The suspect is driving a late-model sports car, identified as a dark blue Ford Mustang, the anchor continued, her voice gaining momentum. He is currently weaving through traffic at speeds estimated to exceed 110 miles per hour. The chopper camera was now focused tightly on the car as it sliced through the afternoon congestion like a scalpel. My beautiful car, the one I had never let anyone else drive, was being subjected to a brutal, violent, public display of incompetence and danger. I could see the tail lights illuminating as the driver slammed on the brakes to avoid a delivery truck, only to dive into a gap in the next lane that wasn't even wide enough for a compact car. It was terrifying, reckless, and yet, there was a perverted part of my brain that recognized the latent power of the engine even through the television. "Oh, my God," I whispered to the empty room, my voice shaking. "Marcus, what have you done?" The reality of the situation hit me like a physical blow. The interview. The job consultation. I'll park in the VIP structure. It was all a lie. Marcus hadn't borrowed my car to secure his future, he had borrowed it to escape his present, or perhaps to participate in something much darker. The aerial footage showed that the entire highway was being choked by police lights. At least 6 state trooper cruisers were in hot pursuit, their emergency lights creating a strobe effect on the road behind my Mustang. The suspect Marcus, my brain finally accepted, was actively fighting them. The anchor's voice rose an octave. "We're seeing the suspect narrowly avoid a collision with a Honda CR-V in the third lane. State police are now deploying spike strips ahead of the suspect at exit 21. I watched, holding my breath, as Marcus I could finally admit it was him, though I couldn't see his face. Saw the officers setting up the strips and, at the last moment, swerved across 3 lanes of traffic, hopped a curb, and roared onto an exit ramp in an aggressive, uncontrolled drift that should have rolled the car. The Mustang's tires shrieked, a sound of protest I could almost hear through the television. My car. He was ruining the transmission, the suspension, the tires. Every move he made was $1,000 in damages. The blue paint was probably already chipped, the front bumper scraped. I felt a weird, protective agony, as if I were watching someone abuse a pet. "Marcus," I screamed at the screen, "just pull over. What are you doing?" The pursuit continued off the interstate, down into the warehouse district, the very place I knew Marcus's Corolla had died earlier that morning. It made sense now. He had staged the Corolla's death nearby to make his story more believable. The anchor was now reading off details supplied by the police. Officers have just confirmed that the suspect in this pursuit, identified as a male matching the description of Marcus Thorne, is considered armed and dangerous. Police began pursuing him after reports of a smash-and-grab robbery at a high-end electronics and jewelry boutique just moments before the chase began. Armrest. I gripped the fabric of my couch so hard my knuckles turned white. He wasn't just fleeing, he had committed an armed felony in my car. I was no longer just the victim of a bad loan, I was potentially an accessory to armed robbery in the eyes of the law. My car was now evidence. It would be impounded, searched, probably disassembled. The pursuit was entering its final, violent act. The helicopter view showed the Mustang navigating the narrower streets of the warehouse district. Marcus was driving with a frantic, desperate intensity, completely oblivious to safety. Then, the helicopter camera caught something small and dark being thrown out of the driver's side window of the Mustang. "We are seeing, the suspect is discarding evidence," the anchor shouted. A heavy black duffel bag was just tossed into a ditch near the 3rd Street underpass. Police units are marking that location but continuing the pursuit. It wasn't a job interview. It was a heist. Marcus had planned this. He knew I wouldn't lend him the Mustang if I knew he was doing something illegal, so he'd concocted a story about the biggest day of his life, appealing to my sense of loyalty and pity. He had used me. He had used my love for the car, my pride, my history with him, all as a tool for his own criminal stupidity. The chase ended on the outskirts of the industrial yard. A state trooper executed a textbook pit maneuver, the front fender of the police cruiser slamming into the rear quarter panel of the Mustang. I watched in agonizing slow motion as my beautiful midnight blue Mustang spun 360 degrees across the gravel, the front end colliding violently with a concrete barrier with a sickening crunch. The engine roared, a last gasp of defiance, before stalling. Smoke billowed from beneath the hood. The airbags deployed. The aerial shot showed the police cruisers swarming, surrounding the wrecked sports car. Officers emerged, guns drawn, shouting commands I couldn't hear. I sat there, defeated. The hum of the TV was the only sound in my house. The silence in the room was a heavy, oppressive thing. I didn't cry. I didn't yell anymore. I just felt empty, a massive void where my trust and my pride used to be. The Mustang GT was gone, a total wreck, but the friendship, the shared history, that felt even more demolished. On the screen, the police dragged Marcus out of the wreckage, his face now visible, twisted in a mask of pain and anger. He didn't look like a friend. He looked like a stranger, a criminal, a man who had just taken my life and wrecked it on national television. I grabbed my phone, and with a shaking hand, dialed the only number I knew would be ready for this call. "Hi, this is Elias," I said, my voice barely a whisper when the dispatcher answered. "I'm calling because I think the car that was just wrecked on Channel 4. I'm the owner. And I think I know the suspect." There is a specific kind of phantom pain that comes with watching something you love be systematically destroyed in high definition. As the news chopper's cameras stabilized, providing a crystal clear 4K feed of my 2024 Mustang GT screaming down the industrial corridor, I didn't just see a car. I felt it. Every time Marcus slammed the gear shifter, I felt the internal synchros of the transmission groan in protest. Every time he pushed the engine past the 7,000 RPM red line, staying in second gear far too long to hear that aggressive, metallic wail, I felt my own chest tighten as if my lungs were being starved of oxygen. To the 3 million people watching Channel 4, this was high-octane entertainment, a real-life Fast and Furious sequence unfolding during the dinner hour. To me, it was a forensic analysis of a murder. The suspect is showing incredible, albeit lethal, driving skill, the news anchor, Sarah Jenkins, narrated. Her voice was clinical, detached. He's using the torque of that vehicle to outmaneuver the standard police interceptors. We're seeing speeds now touching 120 miles per hour as they pass the old shipyard. He's going to blow the head gasket, I whispered, my nose inches from the glass of my television. Marcus, you idiot, shift into fourth. You're killing the engine. But Marcus wasn't listening to the mechanical sympathy I had spent years cultivating. He was driving like a man with a terminal diagnosis and nothing to lose. I watched as he took a sharp right turn onto a gravel-strewn side street. The rear end of the Mustang stepped out, the midnight blue paint catching the strobe light flashes of the police cruisers. It was a beautiful, terrifying drift, the kind of maneuver I'd only ever practiced in empty stadium parking lots at 2 a.m. Marcus executed it with a desperate, jerky violence that sent the car sliding dangerously close to a row of rusted shipping containers. Then came the bag. I saw the driver's side window roll down. A heavy, bulging black duffel bag was shoved out. It tumbled through the air, hitting the asphalt and sliding into a weed-choked drainage ditch. There it is again, the anchor said, her voice rising. The suspect has discarded a second package. Earlier reports suggested a robbery at Vanderbilt & Co. downtown. It appears we are witnessing the disposal of the stolen goods. Vanderbilt & Co. It wasn't just a boutique, it was a high-security diamond and watch dealer. My stomach did a slow, nauseating flip. This wasn't a crime of passion or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a calculated, professional heist. Marcus hadn't borrowed my car because his Corolla died, he had targeted my Mustang because he needed a getaway vehicle with enough horsepower to outrun a radio frequency. He had sat in my kitchen, drank my coffee, and looked me in the eye while planning to use my life's greatest achievement as a getaway mule for blood diamonds. My phone, which I had forgotten was still in my hand, exploded with a new wave of vibrations. It was a group chat from my old college buddies. Bro, is that Eli's car? Look at the plates. That's 100% the Midnight Vanity plate. Eli, tell me you're okay. Tell me you aren't the one driving. I threw the phone onto the rug. I couldn't answer them. What was I supposed to say? No, I'm just the idiot who gave the keys to a felon because he looked sad in a thrift store suit. I watched as Marcus drove the car over a median. The sound of the front air dam, the carbon fiber lip I had paid $2,000 for, shattering against the concrete was audible even through the helicopter's microphone. I let out a low, guttural moan. It was like watching someone skin an animal alive. The Mustang bounced, the suspension bottoming out with a spark-showering thud that suggested the oil pan had just taken a lethal hit. The police are attempting to box him in near the 4th Street Bridge, the reporter continued. The screen split. On the left was the aerial view, on the right, a dashcam feed from one of the pursuing cruisers. I saw my own tail lights, those iconic 3-bar LEDs, flicker as Marcus tapped the brakes, baiting the officer. He was playing games. He was enjoying the power. Suddenly, the Mustang veered left, cutting across a vacant lot filled with construction debris. Dust and gravel erupted in a massive cloud, obscuring the car for a moment. When it emerged, the midnight blue was gone, replaced by a dull, chalky coating of gray filth. A jagged scratch ran the entire length of the passenger side door, deep enough to expose the raw silver of the aluminum underneath. "He's heading for the docks," the anchor said. "There's no exit that way. The state police are closing the perimeter." I felt a strange, cold detachment beginning to take over. The initial shock had passed, replaced by a grim realization: I was watching the final minutes of my car's life. It wouldn't survive this. Even if Marcus stopped now, the engine was cooked, the frame was likely bent, and the interior was probably covered in his panicked sweat and whatever gunpowder residue he was carrying. I thought back to the morning. The way the sun had hit the hood. The smell of the leather. I remembered the day I drove it off the lot, the odometer reading only 4 miles. I remembered the feeling of accomplishment, the physical proof that I had made something of myself. And now, it was a suspect vehicle. It was a piece of evidence. It was a headline. On the screen, the Mustang was trapped in a narrow alleyway between 2 massive brick warehouses. A police cruiser was blocking the far end, and 3 more were screaming in from behind. Marcus didn't stop. He threw the car into reverse, the reverse lights glowing white like the eyes of a cornered predator. He slammed into the front of the lead police car, the heavy steel pushbar of the Interceptor crumpling the Mustang's trunk. "He's ramming them," the anchor shouted. "The suspect is using the vehicle as a weapon." I closed my eyes for a second, unable to watch the mechanical carnage. My car, my sanctuary, was being used to assault officers of the law. "Open your eyes, Elias," I told myself. "Watch it happen. Don't look away from the truth." When I opened them, the Mustang had managed to squeeze past the cruiser, but at a terrible cost. The driver's side mirror was gone, hanging by a few colored wires. The rear bumper was dragging on the ground, creating a rhythmic, metallic scraping sound that the helicopter's high-gain mic picked up clearly. Scrape. 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 It sounded like a heartbeat slowing down. Marcus was heading back toward the main road, but his speed was dropping. Smoke-thick, acrid, blue-gray smoke was starting to pour from the hood scoops. He'd blown a head gasket, just like I thought. Or maybe he'd cracked the block. The car was dying, giving its last bits of mechanical life to a man who didn't deserve a single horsepower. "The vehicle is losing power," the reporter noted. "We are seeing a significant amount of smoke. The pursuit is slowing down as they enter the industrial park." This was the end of the line. The red line wasn't just on the tachometer anymore, it was the limit of Marcus's luck. I watched as he tried to downshift one last time to gain some momentum, but the transmission finally gave up. I could see the car jerk violently as the gears ground into metal shavings. The Mustang rolled to a tentative crawl. It looked exhausted. The deep blue paint was unrecognizable under the layers of dirt, oil, and debris. It looked like a ghost of the machine I had polished that morning. I stood up from the couch, my legs feeling like lead. I walked over to the TV and placed my hand on the screen, right over the blurred image of the hood. The glass was warm from the electronics, but in my mind, I was feeling the heat of the engine. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the car. The news anchor's voice dropped into a more serious, somber tone. "The suspect has come to a halt. Officers are bailing out. This is a high-risk felony stop. We are being told to keep our distance, as the suspect is believed to be armed." The screen was a chaos of flashing red and blue lights. My living room was bathed in the same colors, the light from the TV reflecting off my walls. I saw the doors of the police cars fly open. I saw the rifles being leveled at my driver's side window. At that moment, I didn't care about the insurance. I didn't care about the money or the "I told you so's." I just wanted the nightmare to end. I wanted the car to stop suffering. I wanted the man who had been my friend for 20 years to be a stranger again. "Come on, Marcus," I breathed. "Don't do anything else. Just get out." The camera zoomed in. The driver's door of the Mustang creaked open, bent on its hinges, resisting the movement. I saw a hand reach out. Then another. The red line had been crossed. There was no going back to the way things were at 10 a.m. The favor was over. The betrayal was complete. And as the police moved in, I realized that while Marcus was the one in handcuffs, I was the one who was going to be paying for his crimes for the rest of my life. The silence in my living room was so heavy it felt like it had physical weight, a suffocating pressure that contrasted violently with the frantic, high-decibel chaos erupting on the television screen. I was no longer standing, I had collapsed back onto the edge of my coffee table, my hands trembling so violently I had to tuck them under my armpits. On the screen, the midnight blue Mustang was no longer a car. It was a wounded animal, a thoroughbred with a shattered leg, being hounded toward a cliff by a pack of mechanical wolves. The news chopper shifted its angle, the camera gimbal whirring as it compensated for the pilot's sharp bank. The new perspective showed the geography of the end. Marcus had led the pursuit into a desolate stretch of the industrial wharf, a graveyard of rusted corrugated metal, cracked asphalt, and dead-end fences. To his left, the dark, oily waters of the harbor; to his right, a row of monolithic concrete barriers designed to protect a fuel depot. He was funneling himself into a trap of his own making. "The suspect's vehicle is clearly failing," the news anchor, Sarah, said. Her voice had dropped the excitement of the chase and adopted the grim, hushed tone usually reserved for natural disasters. "The smoke from the engine bay is thickening. You can see the fluid trailing behind the car, likely oil or transmission fluid. This pursuit is reaching its critical conclusion." Behind the Mustang, a state trooper in a heavy-duty Chevrolet Tahoe was closing the gap. This wasn't just any cruiser, it was a reinforced interceptor, its front end dominated by a massive, matte black steel push bar. I watched as the trooper turned off his high-beam spotlights, leaving only the strobe light pulse of the red and blue LEDs. He was positioning himself. He was measuring the distance. He was looking for the sweet spot on the Mustang's rear quarter panel. "Don't," I whispered, the word catching in my throat. "Please, just let him stop. Marcus, just pull over. Give up." I wasn't pleading for Marcus's safety. Not really. I was pleading for the integrity of the machine. I was pleading for the thousands of hours I'd worked to pay for it. I was pleading for the version of Marcus I thought I knew, the guy who helped me move into this house, the guy who shared a beer with me last 4th of July. If he stopped now, maybe some part of that man still existed. If he didn't, the collision wouldn't just break the car, it would shatter the last 20 years of my life into unrecognizable shards. Marcus, however, was past the point of reason. On the dashcam feed, I saw the Mustang's brake lights flicker. He was trying to brake check the 3-ton Tahoe, a move of suicidal desperation. The trooper didn't flinch. He stayed glued to the Mustang's bumper, a predatory shadow. Then came the moment of impact. The Tahoe surged forward, its massive engine roaring as the officer committed to the pit maneuver, the precision immobilization technique. The steel pushbar made contact with the Mustang's rear passenger side wheel well. It was a surgical strike. Through the TV speakers, the sound reached me, a muffled, metallic clunk followed by the horrific, high-pitched shriek of metal being forced against metal. The Mustang's rear tires lost their grip on the oil-slicked asphalt. I watched in agonizing, frame-by-frame slow motion as the car I loved began to rotate. It didn't just slide, it bucked. The suspension, already taxed to its limit, groaned as the lateral forces tried to tear the wheels from their hubs. "He's lost control," the reporter shouted. "The suspect is spinning." The Mustang completed a full 180-degree rotation, the nose now pointing directly at the pursuing police. For a split second, I saw the windshield. I couldn't see Marcus's face, just the white blur of the deployed side curtain airbags and the chaotic silhouette of a man struggling with a steering wheel that was no longer connected to reality. The car didn't stop at 180. The momentum was too great. It continued to spin, a 3,800-pound top made of glass and midnight blue steel. It completed a full 360-degree circle before the rear driver's side tire caught a lip in the pavement. The car tripped. It tilted onto two wheels, the undercarriage, the pristine, rust-free undercarriage I had obsessively cleaned, exposed to the world like the belly of a dying fish. For a heartbeat, I thought it was going to roll. My breath hitched. If it rolled, Marcus was dead. If it rolled, the car was a crushed soda can. But gravity won. The Mustang slammed back down onto all four wheels with a force that shattered the remaining windows. The glass exploded outward like a cloud of diamonds in the police spotlights. But the momentum hadn't vanished, it just redirected. The car slid sideways, dead on toward one of the massive concrete barriers. The impact was catastrophic. The passenger side fender hit the concrete first. The midnight blue paint didn't just scratch, it vanished, replaced by the dull, flat gray of pulverizing stone and the raw, jagged silver of crumpled aluminum. The entire front end of the car folded like an accordion. The hood buckled upward in a sharp V-shape, snapping the hinges and releasing a final, geyser-like burst of steam and coolant that obscured the camera's view. The Mustang came to a dead stop. The silence that followed on the TV was punctuated only by the distant, rhythmic thumping of the helicopter blades. Impact. Major impact. The anchor cried out. The pursuit has ended. The suspect vehicle has collided with the concrete pylon at high speed. We are awaiting movement from the driver. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. I felt a strange, phantom pain in my own ribs, as if the seatbelt pretensioners had fired against my own chest. My car. My beautiful, perfect car was now a mangled pile of junk, a total loss waiting for an insurance adjuster to laugh at. The frame was bent into a crescent moon. The engine was likely pushed back into the firewall. The midnight was gone, buried under dust, smoke, and the wreckage of a friendship. The police didn't move in immediately. They practiced tactical retreat, staying behind their open doors, rifles leveled at the smoking ruin. Driver. Show me your hands. The command was audible through the news feed. For 30 seconds, there was no movement. I felt a cold dread. Is he dead? Did I just watch my friend die in my own car? I thought about Sarah, his girlfriend. I thought about his mother. I thought about the kid who used to share his comic books with me. Then, the driver's side door distorted, hanging by a single hinge creaked open. It didn't open smoothly, it groaned, the metal complaining as Marcus pushed his way out. He emerged like a ghost rising from a grave. His thrift store suit was torn at the shoulder. His face was a mask of blood from the airbag deployment and the glass fragments. He looked small. He didn't look like a high-speed outlaw or a professional heist man. He looked like a broken child who had played with a toy he wasn't supposed to touch and had broken it beyond repair. He stumbled, his legs giving way, and he fell to his knees in the middle of the asphalt. He didn't even look at the car. He didn't look at the police. He just stared at the ground, his hands hovering tentatively in the air, trembling. The officers swarmed. Within seconds, Marcus was tackled to the ground. I watched as they pressed his face into the grit and oil he had just leaked from my engine. The handcuffs clicked into place, a sharp, metallic sound that seemed to signal the finality of the day. The suspect is in custody, Sarah Jenkins announced, her voice returning to its professional, evening news cadence. No officers were injured in the pursuit. We are still awaiting confirmation on the contents of the duffel bags discarded earlier, but police sources indicate a major recovery of stolen assets. I reached out and turned off the TV. The sudden darkness in my living room was absolute. The only light came from the red and blue reflections of a passing tow truck outside my window, an ironic coincidence that made me want to laugh and vomit at the same time. I sat there in the dark for a long time. My phone was still on the rug, silent now, as if my friends and family had realized that the spectacle was over and only the tragedy remained. I thought about the keys. I could still feel the phantom weight of the key fob in my palm from this morning. I remembered the way Marcus had smiled at me, that trust me smile that had been his primary currency for 3 decades. He hadn't just stolen my car. He had stolen my piece of age. He had stolen my ability to look at a friend and see anything other than a potential liability. He had turned my hard-earned success into a punchline on the evening news. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were finally steady, but my heart felt like it had been through the same pit maneuver I'd just witnessed. I looked out the window at the empty driveway. The moon was out, casting a pale, silver light on the spot where the Mustang used to sit. Tomorrow, there would be phone calls to the insurance company. There would be a trip to the police station to give a statement. There would be the inevitable conversation with the lawyer. There would be the "I told you so's" from my brother. But tonight, there was just the silence. The silence of a man who had tried to do a good deed and had watched it spin out of control at 110 miles per hour. I took a sip of the water. It tasted like copper. I realized then that my lip was bleeding. I had been biting it so hard during the chase that I'd broken the skin. I hope the diamonds were worth it, Marcus, I whispered to the shadows. Because they were the most expensive things I've ever bought. The morning after a disaster is always the quietest. The adrenaline has evaporated, leaving behind a thick, gray residue of reality that coats everything you touch. I woke up at 6 a.m. out of habit, my brain momentarily forgetting that the world had shifted on its axis. I swung my feet out of bed, ready to head to the garage for my morning Polish, and then the memory hit me like a physical punch to the solar plexus. The Mustang was gone. Not just gone, obliterated. I walked into the kitchen and stared at the empty hook where my keys used to hang. It looked like a missing tooth in a smile. I made a pot of coffee, but I didn't drink it. I just sat at the table and watched the steam rise, listening to the silence of a house that no longer had a high-performance engine sleeping in the garage. By 9 a.m., the phone calls started. First, it was Detective Miller from the City Police Department. His voice was gravelly and devoid of the drama the news anchor had projected the night before. To him, this was just another Tuesday night, another pile of paperwork, another idiot with a fast car. Mr. Vance. We need you down at the 4th precinct. We have your vehicle in the impound lot, and we need a formal statement regarding the, unauthorized use of the car. Unauthorized use, I repeated. The words felt small. He robbed a jewelry store, detective. He used my car as a battering ram. Right. We'll talk about all that here. Bring your registration and insurance papers. The precinct smelled of floor wax, burnt coffee, and old sweat. It was a place where dreams went to be processed into case numbers. I sat on a hard plastic chair for 2 hours, watching a flickering fluorescent light overhead. When Detective Miller finally called me into his office, he didn't offer me a seat. He just pushed a folder across the desk. Your friend, Marcus Thorne, Miller began, leaning back. He's got a colorful history we didn't know about. A string of petty thefts in 3 different states, mostly unpaid. But this was the big leagues. Vanderbilt & Co. He took nearly $400,000 worth of loose diamonds and high-end watches. I thought he was going to a job interview, I said, feeling the heat rise in my neck. Miller let out a dry, mirthless chuckle. The only job Marcus was interviewing for was prisoner number 4829. He's been planning this for months, Elias. He didn't just happen to have his car break down in your neighborhood. He needed a car that could outrun our cruisers. He needed yours. The betrayal finally took its final, jagged shape. It wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a targeted strike on my trust. Marcus had scouted me. He'd used our 20-year friendship as a tactical advantage. "Can I see him?" I asked. Miller squinted at me. "Why? You want to punch him?" "Because I can't let you do that, as much as I might want to." "No," I said, my voice hollow. "I just want to see his face. I want to see if he's still in there." They led me to a small, cramped room divided by a thick pane of scratched plexiglass. A few minutes later, a heavy steel door opened, and Marcus was led in. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. His face was a map of bruises, a purple hematoma over his left eye, a jagged row of stitches across his forehead where the glass had kissed him. He sat down, but he wouldn't look at me. He picked at a loose thread on the cuff of his jumpsuit. "Hey," I said. He didn't respond. "The news said you threw the bags out the window, Marcus. They found them. You did all that for nothing. You wrecked my life for a pile of rocks that are currently sitting in an evidence locker." Finally, he looked up. His eyes weren't filled with remorse. They were filled with a dull, flickering resentment. "You always had everything, Eli," he whispered, his voice cracking. "The house. The car. The perfect life. You worked overtime. Big deal. I worked my whole life just to stay at 0. I just needed one win. One big score, and I could have been someone." "You were someone, Marcus," I snapped, slamming my hand against the glass. "You were my friend. You were the guy I trusted with the only thing I ever truly owned for myself. You didn't steal from Vanderbilt. You stole from me. I thought I could make it back before you even noticed," he lied. It was a pathetic, transparent lie. "I thought I'd be back by 4. You'd never have known. I saw you on the news, Marcus. I watched you kill my car. I watched you turn my name into a headline." He looked back down at his hands. "I needed the money, man. Sarah, she was gonna leave. I had to do something." "Sarah did leave," I said, though I didn't actually know if she had. "I just knew she should. And now you're going away for a long time. Was it worth the midnight blue?" He didn't answer. The guard tapped on the door, signaling that our time was up. Marcus stood up, his chains clinking with a rhythmic, funeral sound. He walked out without looking back. That was the last time I ever saw him. The final stop was the impound lot. I had to sign the release forms for the insurance adjuster. The lot was a sea of twisted metal and shattered glass, but my car was easy to find. It was the only midnight blue shape in a desert of gray. Seeing it up close was worse than seeing it on TV. The smell hit me first, the acrid scent of burnt oil, deployed airbag chemicals, and something sweet, like spilled soda. The front end was a grotesque snarl of metal. The engine block, the heart of the beast, was cracked open like a walnut. I reached out and touched the one piece of the rear fender that wasn't dented. The paint was still smooth. Still deep. Still beautiful. The insurance adjuster, a man named Henderson, stood next to me with a clipboard. "It's a total loss, Mr. Vance. No question. The frame is warped beyond repair. Even if we could source the parts, the labor alone would exceed the value of the vehicle." "I figured," I said. "There's another issue," Henderson said, coughing into his hand. "Since you voluntarily handed him the keys, the company is looking at the unauthorized use clause. Because it wasn't a theft in the traditional sense, they might deny the full replacement value. We're looking at a 50% payout, at best." I looked at the wreck. I had $20,000 left on the loan. A 50% payout wouldn't even cover the debt. I was going to be paying for a ghost for the next 3 years. Is that right? I asked, a dry, hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. I'm sorry, Mr. Vance. It's a tough break. I left the impound lot on foot. I didn't have a car, and the nearest bus stop was half a mile away. As I walked, the clouds finally broke, and a cold, drizzling rain began to fall. It soaked through my jacket, but I didn't care. I stood at the bus stop with 3 other people, a woman clutching a grocery bag, an old man in a frayed coat, and a teenager with headphones. We all stood there in the gray light, waiting for a machine to take us where we needed to go. I looked down at my hands. They were stained with a bit of the soot from the car's engine. I tried to rub it off, but it just smeared, leaving a dark, permanent-looking mark on my palm. A silver sedan drove past, splashing a puddle onto the sidewalk. I didn't flinch. I just watched it go. The bus finally pulled up, its brakes squealing with a sound that reminded me of the Mustang's final moments. I climbed the steps, swiped my card, and found a seat in the back. I looked out the window as the city blurred past. I had learned a very expensive lesson. Some things are too precious to share, not because of their price tag, but because of what they represent. My car wasn't just a car, it was my pride. And Marcus wasn't just a friend, he was my blind spot. I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the cold glass of the bus window. I wasn't thinking about the diamonds, or the police, or the insurance adjusters. I was just thinking about that Tuesday morning. The sun hitting the driveway. The microfiber cloth in my hand. The way the midnight blue seemed to hold the whole world in its reflection. I had been so careful to keep it clean. I had been so careful to keep it perfect. But in the end, it didn't matter how much I polished the outside. The rot was always sitting in the passenger seat, waiting for the keys.